This is Professor Rogers. This is a short video on research design and quantitative methods. My point is a simple one. Statistical techniques are often tied to the research design. Every statistical technique is not appropriate for every design, so we often pick the technique in light of the design that we use. I'll discuss this today in terms of three different kinds of designs: correlational and quasi-experimental designs, factorial models, and longitudinal and time series models. When we talk about research methods in the social sciences, we often begin with the experimental model. In the experimental model, we divide our subjects into two groups. Group 1, which receives the treatment or intervention, and Group 2, which does not. We refer to the second group as the control group. Individuals are assigned to each group through a random selection process, and we do tests before and after the intervention in order to determine whether or not the intervention itself was successful. In reality, a large portion of research in the social sciences is not experimental in nature. Most statistical analyses assume correlational or quasi-experimental designs. Correlation designs are those in which the data is collected at one point in time. An example is a survey, where we ask your opinion about matters and also certain socio-demographic characteristics. We then correlate your opinions with your socioeconomic characteristics at that particular point in time. Quasi-experimental designs break the rules of random assignment, but still allow for sensible basic contrast to be made. If, for example, I were studying aggression, either its causes or techniques of prevention, I might want to divide my subjects into male and female based on the assumption that males are more aggressive than females. This makes sense to do that in this particular subject. However, it's not random assignment, so we are breaking one of the basic rules of the experimental model. In data analysis, we also do not differentiate between independent and control variables. The software doesn't know that. It's the theory that determines whether the variable is going to be regarded as control or independent. Here's an example of this using the regression procedure in SPSS. Here I run what's called a multiple regression. I have many variables that I'm using to predict crime rates at a county level. All of these things that I'm using to predict crime rates are in a box called independents. That leads you to think that these are all independent variables, but that's not true. You can't tell from what's in that box what is my independent variable and what my control variables are. Mathematically, statistical procedures treat independent and control variables the same way. Again, it is my theory and not the math that determines whether a variable is independent or control. Finally, we do have issues about the sample in correlational and quasi-experimental designs. It's important to remember that a statistical analysis is only as good as the sample. But there is a technique called weighting that can correct for some sources of bias and error. Some of these biases are intentional. They occur when I use a stratified or cluster sampling technique. There can also be slight after the sample adjustments in order to correct for deviations from a population with known parameters. Finally, there are weighting techniques that also can reduce the influence of individual outliers. Now, because I have a separate video on how to do weighting, and also because we deal with these things in more detail in some other videos, I am not going to show you some examples of that here, but it's important to keep in mind that weighting is something that we do with correlational and quasi-experimental designs to correct for biases, whether they are intentional or unintentional. The next subject I want to look at is factorial designs. We have factorial designs when we have two or more categorical variables that we want to use as independent or control variables. So, for example, if I'm looking at an educational outcome, I might be concerned about the setting in which the student is, and I might also be concerned about their time in instruction. Setting and time in instruction are what we call main effects. The thing about factorial designs is that there may be interactions between those effects that are in addition to those main effects. So we look at each group individually, both in terms of how the main effects affect the cell and also whether or not these interactions exist. The general linear model procedures that are in SPSS actually do allow for the creation of these interaction terms. So some of the things that you might see with GLM would include general linear models, the univariate procedure, the multivariate procedure, and repeated measures. Finally, I want to look at those models where time is a factor, longitudinal models and time series models. The simplest longitudinal model is the experimental design, where we are dealing with at least 2 and possibly 3 points in time tied to the pre-test, intervention, and post-test. There are more complicated versions of longitudinal models in which there are a variety of panels and waves which can be formed over time. If you are looking at a longitudinal study, that's exactly what that means, that the same group of respondents was surveyed many times over an extended period of time. Also related to this are time series models, which are their own statistical technique. In time series, we have issues of what we call auto-regression and autocorrelation. Auto-regression has to do with the fact that when we look at data over time, often the best predictor of this year's value is last year's value. So if I'm looking at crime rates across the United States, I might be saying the way I could predict this year's crime rate is to look at last year's crime rate, that they are fairly constant over time. The example that I have here is an economic example in which economists are interested in a particular variable, and then there are leading indicators, perhaps several months out, that indicate what's going to happen in the future. So time series autocorrelation occurs when we have error that is correlated over time as well. For example, during war years, we often see sometimes errors clustering together, and so we want to adjust for those effects. So that's what time series models do, and in those cases we select that kind of approach over a regular regression model in order to study outcomes.